Hey guys, it's me Vampi and I am back with another craft video, but one with a bit of a twist. This is going to be our Vampi Christmas special, and instead of showing you one craft today, I'm going to show you several little Christmassy crafts to get you in the Christmas holiday spirit. We haven't had a tree the last few years, but if I were to have a dream tree, sort of envision it, there's lots of beautiful gothic trees, vampire-esque, reds and blacks and things like that, but I thought I wanted to do something a little bit different, and I thought, what if we did like a zombie tree, or and that's been done before as well with, you know, little zombie road signs and little zombie figurines and things like that, but I wanted to do something that looked kind of like if Ed Gein had decorated for Christmas. So anything can be an ornament if you add a piece of string to it. It's super simple and you can get as creative as you want. So this is just a finger here that we've added some string to. I'm not going to use fancy bows or Christmas colors or anything like that because I want it to be super realistic. I've got a tongue, I've got some ears, I've got some eyeballs, lots of fingers, some teeth, all that sort of stuff. So they're going to be the ornaments on our Christmas tree later. And I'm going to show you how to make two different sets of intestines, and that's what we're going to use for our tinsel. So I'll pack this up and I'll teach you how to make that. These ones are all latex, so they're quite detailed as well. With the tongue here, I just added a tongue piercing because I wanted that hyper realistic sort of look, and also, you know, I want people to be able to easily recognize that that is a tongue. And then we've also glossed it as well, so it has that sort of sticky saliva grossness to it. And the last ones that we will be using to decorate the tree will be eyeballs, because you can't have a serial killer body tree without some eyeballs. So I've just attached some string to those ones as well. Super gluing string to it like I will with the others. I'm just going to use a bit of this string to wrap around it. I also don't really want to damage these silicone fingers because silicone's a lot more expensive than latex and the cheap crappy fingers that we'll be using. So there we go. That one is ready to hang. We'll add some more blood to everything a little bit later as well. And I have an ear here, and I really like the way that the tongue came out, so I'm gonna add a little earring to one of these ears as well, because I think it's those little tiny details that count. And so I've chucked on a little apron because we're going to be using latex to make these intestines, and once you get latex on your clothes, that's it, ruined forever. So the first way we're going to do these is the packing peanut intestines. So these you can just get at any sort of store where you buy packing things, and there's two ways. Basically, we're going to join these packing peanuts together to create the shape of the intestines. You can get a needle and thread and stitch through each of them. It's easier and quicker, I find, as I just dip it in a little bit of latex and they just stick together perfect like that. And it's quite quick and cheap, easy way. You only need a tiniest little dab of latex and they just sort of stick together. And before you know it, you can have meters and meters of intestines with these bad boys. So I'm just going to connect this to this other part that I did the other day. So the bad thing about packing peanuts is they do shrink. So this was sort of the size that I was wanting, but no matter what I did, spray paint, acrylics, fake blood, they just shrivel up into themselves. So what you have to do is essentially, once you get the length how you want it, you're going to paper mache along the length of the intestines, and you just put a tiny bit of latex onto the intestine, and then you wrap a little bit of paper, and you just continue that all the way along, and it will still shrink. So that's kind of like a good comparison of what they look like brand new out of the bag and what they'll look like when they shrink. But when you're adding in the paper towel or the tissue paper on top of this, it sort of stops it soaking into the peanut and completely disintegrating. So once you do that, it dries pretty quickly, the latex does. That is now good for you to paint, cover in blood, do what you want to do with it. So I guess it really depends what sort of intestines you're going for, what look you're going for. And they don't have to be too perfect. We're just putting them on a Christmas tree as decoration. It's not like, you know, they're going to be on film or something. Obviously, if you're wanting really, really realistic organs, you're going to want to sculpt them and then make a mold and pour them out of latex or silicone or something like that. But this is a really cheap, quick, effective way of making like that organic looking intestine shape. Cool, so this is what it looks like as a complete finished product here. You wouldn't look at that and think it's packing peanuts. So that's one way of doing it. The other way is a little bit quicker. So this is how to make our second set of intestines. So they will look a little bit different, and these ones are much quicker and easier to make. So all we're going to need is a brush, a clean hard surface, and again the brushing latex. So all you do is brush a thick-ish layer. So any hard surface will work for this. If you want to do it on like your kitchen bench or bathroom tiles or something like that, anything that's flat and smooth so that the latex can be peeled off easily afterwards. And obviously this section of intestines is only going to be as long as this table here, but you can do them as long or as short as you want, and you can also join them together as well if they're not as long as you want them to be. So these ones are about 35 centimeters widthwise, because we're actually going to roll these intestines and we're going to have stuffing in the middle. So what you want to do is basically what I've done here as the first coat. You want to do at least 2, 3, even 4 coats, and you wait about half an hour, 20 minutes between coats, just enough for it to dry, and then slowly build up that thickness. All right, so this is one that I prepared yesterday, and this is completely dry. So this was 3 coats of latex onto the board, and it's just dry to the touch. That's all you sort of need. Now what we're going to do is create the inside of the intestine. So you can use the packing peanuts for this if you want to, but usually we just use a little bit of polyfill that you can sort of get at any craft shop. And essentially we're making intestine sushi. So if ever you've like rolled sushi before, that's what we're going to be doing. So you sort of just clump up how thick you want it. And while I'm doing this, another little tip is make sure you're washing your brush between each layer of latex, because as soon as the latex dries in your brush, you're never going to get that brush back. So I just went and quickly washed that brush so I can use it again later. And that is it. So literally it's just latex, polyfill, and no glues or solvents or anything like that, because latex will actually stick to itself. Have it coming off a little bit. This is where we're going to start to roll it in on itself like this. And these look so much better than, you know, the tacky, cheap plastic intestines that you get at Halloween time, and it's so easy and quick to do. And they don't look like much now, but you know, if you have a Halloween costume where you've got your guts hanging out of the bottom of your shirt, once they're covered in blood, it hides so many little imperfections, and people aren't gonna question, you know, how real or fake they look. And once we're done, latex kind of already has a neutral kind of yellowy, beigey skin color. You can pre-paint them, so airbrush them or acrylic paints, give them like, I guess, more of a pinky red shade so they look more like the inside of your guts. Or you can just literally cover them in fake blood. And that is how you make super basic latex and polyfill intestines. Okay, so there are plenty of fake blood recipes out there on the internet, and every special effects makeup artist has their own particular one that they use, and we also have different types for different things. So if you're in a movie where a limb's coming off and we need to have really fast shooting arterial blood, it's going to be different to say something that is mouth safe. And this is kind of like my all-rounder blood recipe, and this is what I have sort of concocted that works best for what we're doing here. So it's very, very simple. The secret ingredient is the cheapest home brand chocolate sauce that you can find, and the reason we have that is it darkens the blood and it makes it thicker as well, not appear so red and fake looking, I guess. We have red food dye, obviously, but we also use blue sometimes and more often than not green, again just to give it that real depth so it's not just like red paint or like tomato sauce looking blood. And then just these two ingredients alone, if you're doing like a close-up shot where you want to have a bit of blood coming out of your mouth, or you know you're drinking blood or something like that, this is fine. Then for something extra where with our intestines we want them to look slimy and gross, like they've just come out of the body, we're going to use this. So this is just glucose syrup, and you can just get that at Coles or Safeway or any of your local sort of stores. And the good thing about this is, again, there's many ways to make fake blood, there's no wrong or right way, but this, because it's basically just sugar, when it dries looking wet. And that's what we want, because we want to have these decorations on the tree, but we don't want them to be sticky, you know, if we walk past and accidentally get sticky. So I'll show you how I mix it. There's no perfect science to this. You sort of get the hang of it as you go. And also, you can't really stuff it up. If you make it too red, you add more chocolate sauce or more or more green food dye. If it's too brown, add more. Again, this, that, the other. So it really is just like a sort of, you mix it, test a little bit, see how it looks. It will look different, obviously, on skin and on other things other than in the bowl. So I always sort of lift it up in the light and just check that it's not too brown or too red. So I've been on set before where they've used soy sauce, and I mean, I love salt, but having a whole mouthful of it is really intense. And also soy sauce isn't quite as thick as the chocolate sauce. So if you see, the chocolate sauce really gives you that good runny, but not too runny, thick blood. So for Halloween, trick-or-treating, costumes, things like this, if you're wanting edible blood that can go in the mouth and that's body safe, this is really, really simple way of doing it. And it does look quite dark in the bowl, but it really isn't, because if we just lift that up a little bit and sort of spread it out, you know, which it's not going to always just be thick and gluggy like this. Pretty happy with that colour. I'm a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to my fake blood. I think that it's a little bit brown for my liking, so I'm going to add just a tiny bit more red, and then I'm going to add in the glucose syrup. It's always good to add a little bit extra red when using the glucose syrup as well, because it will, I guess, for lack of a better term, water it down, because it is just a clear gum. And the more of this you put in, the more stiff it will become, and the shinier that it will become. And this is still obviously, you know, body and mouth safe. It's just very sickly sweet. So if I was going to be putting this in my mouth, I would do it without the glucose syrup. And now you can do whatever you want with this. You can decorate cakes, you could put your props in it, you can paint it on stuff, you can put it on your body. Like I said, if you're doing makeup look or something like that, that is good to go. And the only thing with this recipe, obviously it's very food color. So the only bad thing about this recipe is because there is so much food coloring inside it, is when it does go on your skin for a long period of time, you are going to get stained. You are going to look a little bit pink and a little bit red. So the amount of days I've come home from photo shoots and showered, and then I get out of the shower and I look sunburnt, it's because we would have used something like this recipe. So for decorating the Christmas tree ornaments, I'm going to put some gloves on because I don't want to have red hands. Okay, so now that our fake blood's made and I am all gloved up and aproned up, because this bit is the bit that gets really messy. So here are the intestines that we made with just the brushing latex and the polyfill foam. And that's what I mean by sort of giving it a bit of a pre-paint. You don't want to go too dark and you don't want to paint it red because then there's no point putting the blood on it. So giving it that sort of fleshy organ tone color. And then this is the one that we literally just made that's just regular latex color. So you can sort of do this any way you can. I'm just going to dip it in this bowl because I did make a lot of blood, and sort of, I guess, cover it as much or as little as I want. I don't want it to be too covered because you do want to be able to sort of see the details, or you can brush it on. Either way, it's a sticky, messy job. So you can sort of brush that on. This is probably a good outside job, or yeah, put down a bag or some plastic or something like that. So I'll just do a little bit of each so you can see the difference in color. That's the intestine that had a little bit of pre-paint. This one didn't. So it depends how little blood you're going to put on it and what it's going to be used for. That's why I said it doesn't really matter that you paint it straight away anyway. So these are really sticky, and they'll probably be sticky for quite a few hours. You'll leave them out overnight probably is best, and they will dry. And then they will be dry to the touch like these ones here. So these are the ones that I did yesterday. And because we added that glucose syrup, that's why they're so shiny. Gives it that really glossy look, which is what I'm going for with this Christmas tree. So I'm just going to finish these ones up, and you'll see them later on the tree when we decorate it. So another sort of holiday tradition is having the Santa socks up above the fireplace, and I decided to make one out of different people's skins that I've stitched together here. So first step for basically everything that I do is to create a template. So obviously just cut 2 pieces of fabric in the same shape, end up with this sort of flimsy fabric one. This was the only sort of fabric I had at home at the time. It doesn't really matter though, because we're going to be doing lots of coats of latex and paint and things like that. It is going to stiffen up a lot. So first up, what we want to do is create the different skin segments on the sock. So what I have used is the foam, which I've already pre-cut to sort of fit the sock. Now I just have to figure out how the jigsaw pieces all go back together. I think I have that part there. So it doesn't look like much at the moment, and obviously it's all black and white, so it doesn't really resemble skin at all. But now what we do is we're going to start sponging on latex. So once you've completed this all the way up the sock, and you can do it however you want, we're going to start applying the latex. So I just have a bit of sponge here. You can use a brush if you want. The reason I'm going to use the sponge, or at least on the top couple of coats, is it will give it, the latex, a skin-like texture, because obviously skin, you're not going to see brush strokes and things like that. So just a little bit of latex and just start dabbing it. Once the latex is dry and you've done a few coats, it will come out looking like this sock here. So I think that's 3 coats of latex, 3 or 4. that have dried now. I'm going to paint each skin segment a slightly different shade of flesh tone because I want it to look like I've made these stockings out of several victims. But what we need to do first is just get a base coat down, and we want to use a little bit of acrylic paint mixed with latex just so that the latex sticks to this better, because latex will stick to latex and it will just give us like a nice base before we airbrush or paint or anything like that. It doesn't have to be all the different colors, it's just to put on as a base. Also, the reason that we sort of use the skin base as well is because we did use black foam, we sort of want to cover up that a little bit just so it's easier to paint some of the paler colors onto it. With the paint and latex mix, you sort of want about a 40-60 ratio. So 40% sort of latex, 60% paint, but I'm just quickly putting it on here like this just so you can see what it looks like when it's finished. And when that coat of latex dries, we'll be ready to paint this sock. You can sort of, around the edges where it's not completely attached to the sock, you can put a little bit of latex in there and sort of push it down as you go as well to help connect it. And I'll do that over the whole sock and then let it dry. You can use a heat gun to sort of make it a little bit faster. Latex does dry really quick. Once that has dried, which again probably like 10-20 minutes in between each coat depending if you use a hairdryer or something to speed up the process, I would do 2 or 3 more coats, and that's more not so much for the skin texture, but I want to build up the thickness of latex in between the skin panels because I want it to look like someone's sort of cut it with a knife, and I don't want these really harsh edges, I want them to be a little bit softer. So I'll show you what this looks like when fully completed. So once you've fully latexed the whole sock and you've done a couple of coats and it's dry, this is what the sock will look like. So I've taken the cardboard out of the middle. So again, it's quite strong, and now it is ready for painting. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paint in all these bits here, and you can be as messy as you want, sort of get it in all those little cracks. Okay, so now we're just sort of going to dab it off a little bit, especially in these middle sections. See how it sort of creates that fleshy tone underneath, and it just builds up a layer of that colour. And that's what I want. I don't want it to look just red. I want it to look like actual cut flesh. So that's what the wash is for. I mean, obviously you don't have to do this if you don't want to, but I want it to look sort of as realistic as we can. Perfect. And we can, if you want it more red, you can leave it more red, but we're also going to add some fake blood at the end as well. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start painting the patches with the different skin tones. So I'm just going to use the airbrush for that. So I'm going to do a few different coats of each colour because real skin isn't just one colour. And the more sort of that you layer it up little bit by little bit, the more realistic it looks. So I've chose this sort of pale colour first. So I'm going to do this bit the same. Cool, so now what I'm going to do, once I sort of have like a rough sort of coat of what colours I want to use, is I'm going to go in, especially with the lighter skin tones, and I'm just going to sort of paint in some really light veins. And I mean, you can go crazy with the veins if you want to make like a zombie sock or something like that, but it sort of builds up the layers of the skin, because if you look at your actual skin, you'll see all, you know, little bits of hair follicles and veins and things like that. So this sort of just, you don't have to go too dark, you don't have to go too overboard with them either, but just a little bit of detail. You can go over and hit it with the airbrush again. It gives it that sort of more mottled effect, makes it look a little bit more realistic as well. Splatter, and you can do this with all your colours, so you can do it with a bit of blue, bit of green, bit of red, some of the flesh tones, the different coloured flesh tones. And again, it doesn't sort of look like much now, but it's these little tiny imperfections and these little tiny dots that make it look more like real skin. All I did was went in with a needle and thread and did the stitches all the way along. You could do staples if you wanted to. You could use a thin black cord, sort of like what you would get if you went to hospital and got stitches. And I left this large sort of opening intentionally, so I would probably stitch along here and then have a few broken stitches, like it's sort of popped open there. That's the effect I was going for. And then when you're finished, you'll end up with your finished sock.